Hello everyone and welcome back to Monsters of the Mind. As always, I'm your host Mr. G. Well, today we're dealing with our first American monster. And it's our second video about a giant bird, although this one's a lot different, as we'll see later. Anyway, today we're talking about the giant bird known as the ThunderBird. ThunderBird means thunder bird. And whether or not it was a species or an individual depends on who you ask. I mean, a lot of places call it the Thunderbird, but there's several native groups that that have the Thunderbird as a species, as we'll see later on. So, yeah. It was pretty benevolent since most stories describe it as protecting humanity, and it lived in North America and it comes from several Native American folklores. The Thunderbird is most often described as a giant eagle like the Rock, except possibly bigger, because while the Rock is shown lifting elephants with ease, the Thunderbird is sometimes depicted as being able to lift up whales. Also, some depictions of it give it two heads. Also, unlike the Rock, which was basically just a giant eagle, the Thunderbird actually had powers. It was actually considered responsible for bringing the rains, and apparently, when it flapped its wings, it created thunder, and it could shoot lightning out of its eyes. As for what it did, that depends on who you're asking. In Algonquian folklore, it's said that the Thunderbird has control over the overworld and is constantly fighting off creatures from the underworld. In Ojibwe tales, it is said that the Thunderbird punished anyone who did anything morally wrong. In Menominee tales, the Thunderbird is actually a species that live in a floating mountain. Here they're portrayed as messengers of the sun and are always protecting humans from being devoured by evil snake beings. And according to Ho-Chunk tradition, if you have a vision of the Thunderbird while on a vision quest, then that means you'll be a war chief. The common theme with almost all of these Thunderbird legends seems to follow a similar trend of the Thunderbird being some sort of guardian, or if not a guardian, then at least a very important figure. Rain is a very important thing after all. Which is interesting, that so many different groups have different interpretations of the same being, but they always have something similar in common so that you can always tell it's supposed to be the same creature. I don't know why, I just find that fascinating. Oh yeah, the Thunderbird is also the thing you see on top of totem poles. I just wanted to throw that out there. In some circles, the Thunderbird is even a cryptid, and some people think that an explanation for it is a late surviving Asdarkid pterosaur like Quetzalcoatlus. But I'll get back to this in a later video. I have an entire video planned dealing with late surviving dinosaurs and pterosaurs, and I'll go more in detail with the topic in that video. So just you wait. Now here's Vincent. The Thunderbird. He's a good bird, but I don't have anything really much to say about him. Funny story. Zeus and Thor are both obsessed with him and want him as a pet, but the Thunderbird keeps telling him no. But Zeus and Thor are very persistent at it. They always beg him to be their pet. In fact, they often fight each other for him, but the Thunderbird every time just looks the other way and just flies off, ignoring them. It's quite funny, actually. But other than that, I just kind of see him whenever rain comes, and yeah, never really got a good interaction with him. Now let's look at the card. Before we continue, I just want to bring up the fact that in my rock video, I probably should have deducted points for the fact that it looked like a bald eagle, which did not live in the Middle East, so it would have been nearly impossible for the writers to have been aware of it when making their stories. So I probably should have deducted a point for that. Anyway, the bald eagle's more forgiving here since, obviously, bald eagles live in North America. And this card is actually pretty good in general, really. It describes its roles quite well, talks about the time it lifted a whale, stuff like that. I'm just gonna say it, I think this is the first time I've ever had to give two 10 out of 10s in a row, because I can't really find anything wrong with this card. It does its job quite well. Unfortunately, I could only dig up 2 Thunderbird appearances, but in all fairness, this was a difficult creature to look up since every time I just got results for the car named Thunderbird, so I couldn't really do much with this, but yeah, I was only able to dig up 2 appearances. There is an Animal Planet show called Lost Tapes, which is basically a show dealing with if cryptids were real. It was pretty stupid. Anyway, an episode was about the Thunderbird. Here it was portrayed as an Asdarkid pterosaur, except They don't seem to know a lot about pterosaurs, considering the fact that they portray as dark-haired pterosaurs like they were shrikes, in that they would impale their prey over thorns. Yeah, there is no fossil evidence for this whatsoever, and it is incredibly speculative behavior to a ridiculous degree. The only other appearance I could find is in the Harry Potter spin-off, Fantastic Beasts, and that's another one for the list. That's all for this episode of Monsters of the Mind. Join us next time when we talk about a bull. Bye!